to be honest, this is the most starkest warning or statement I've ever heard come out of the NHC, and this is what they say: potentially catastrophic Category 5 Hurricane Irma heading toward the Leeward Islands. Preparations should be nearing completion in the easternmost Leeward Islands, and if you haven't done that, well, you're running out of time, and you need to do it now. I don't know what
that should be assured, and pretty obvious to all of the areas in the hurricane warning zone, and those in the hurricane watch zone. You know, what would you say, Craig? I'd suggest that all of those areas should be preparing for almost certain hurricane in the watch zone too.
Yeah, pretty. If you are in the watch zone, you could be experiencing, well, how can I put it? Strong hurricane force winds. I don't know about strength, possibly major hurricane force. So you could be looking at extreme damaging winds regardless. But, you know, whichever way you look at it, it's going to be very, very scary. And it's going to be, well, in fact, it's beyond scary. It's horrifying. So, to be honest, you know, if you are in the path, I'm going to have to wait. I'm not going to have to. I will wish you the best of luck. I hope you all can get through this hurricane. And to be honest, this hurricane is not going to be the smoothest of hurricanes to get past, unfortunately.
Just to reiterate those...
I wish it would just miss the islands.
Just to reiterate those distances, a little confused at the start there. 143 miles east-northeast of Guadeloupe right now. That is as of 7 p.m. UTC, which is right now, the latest imagery. 163 miles east of Antigua, 172 miles east-southeast of Barbuda. And I want to show some more imagery views if possible, or I wanted to, but it looks like we can't, so we'll just stick with what we already had on that visible imagery. And you can see how what is a very nearly annular storm continues to progress, and one of its southern bands still producing some significant thunderstorms off Dominica now. Already seeing some thunderstorms. Now,
yeah.
Are you staying with us here, or were you going to go away for a few minutes?
Yeah, I'm staying.
Okay. Well, I want to talk to you about
for a few minutes. About that later.
Excuse me. I want to talk to you about what other people are mentioning about how what the precedent is for this a storm of this intensity, and officially it would be something like, well, joint second most strongest storm in the Atlantic. However, Force 13 did its own independent analysis of many of the storms in the Atlantic, wasn't very keen on Allen at all, and put it down to 175. So,
yeah,
by our reckoning, it is stronger than Allen. However, we did upgrade Gilbert to 195, and Wilma also, no doubt, up to 195 at least. So we think it's the third strongest storm in the Atlantic, but that's just one for the number crunchers. The fact of the matter is that it's going to impact land near this peak intensity, and I don't think there's since proper forecasting began that we've had the potential of a landfall at this intensity, which there is the potential for on Barbuda.
Yeah. That's, well, going to be catastrophic if it does, and when it does. Regardless of if you do not get the eye, you could be getting Category 5 force hurricane winds without a break, and that's even worse. Regardless of getting the eye and the full brunt of the storm, including the eye, you are going to get absolutely whacked, regardless if you do get the peace and calm of the eye. So, you know, we've got to hold tight, and I hope, well, not we, but everyone in the path of this has got to hold tight, and I hope that you all can get through it.
Alright, now I want to show you some more imagery of the longer range images that we're looking at here. The infrared of what it's been doing in the last few hours. And you can see how the progression has been occurring. Whilst the cloud tops haven't increased that much, it's the size of the eye wall that's increased quite a bit, and the eye itself that's become a real, well, how do you describe a very good eye? Round and very deep indeed. Certainly not ragged in any way, and the warm temperatures inside the eye is always a good indicator of how intense the storm is. We'll have some closer infrared images for you shortly as well. And here's another view of the visible imagery throughout today so far, and how the storm's been progressing there. And that's always what people what really grabs the headlines really is how the eye looks on the visible, and all the clouds swirling within it. On the 1 minute imagery, obviously it looks the best that it does look. And I don't know if you've got any comments on its eye structure and its eye wall today, Craig, if he's still with us. He'll be back at some point. In the meantime, the storm continues to move pretty much in a westerly direction. It's ever so slightly to the north of west, and it's got, as I say, winds of 185 miles per hour and a pressure of 926. Well, let's see if we can now get some more imagery that we can show you from infrared, and a proper close-up type imagery here that we can show you in just a moment or two whilst we configure it here. Do bear with me briefly. And here you'll be able to see how the storm is looking in the latest frames. If you've got any comments or questions for us, start your message with Force 13 all in text, and I expect that most of this evening, whilst we're watching this storm draw nearer and nearer to the islands, we'll be taking your questions. We'll take everything and anything that you send into us that's related to the storm. For instance, a question that's come in about, in Tampa, am I safe? That's a good question, and I don't yet know the answer. Same for Broward County, which has just been mentioned. And there's something else I want to show you that will try to answer those questions, and that would be the spread of the models. And let's see if we can take a look at that right now. Here's what the models are showing at the moment. Now, if you were watching earlier on in the stream, or earlier today when we were streaming, most of the models were sort of halfway through Florida and one or two on the west coast, but now it would appear that most of the models, or a small majority of the models, are now trending back east again, and are possible riding up the east coast of Florida as a significant system. The GFS earlier today said that the storm would pass very, very close to Miami, moving north with a pressure of 899 millibars. And this is one of several crazy model runs that the GFS has produced, but the H1 has produced equally crazy model runs, and the HWRF has said that it will be a borderline Category 5 when it nears Florida. When you've got three models in consensus in a row, there is the point where you sort of say, well, maybe this has some sort of levity, I suppose. Whether it will be sub 900 millibars, I think, is quite far-fetched, but that's probably irrelevant. The fact of the matter is that there is the potential for a Category 5 or a Category 4 storm to impact all of the islands depicted and Florida, and the National Hurricane Center on their latest forecast suggesting that it will be Category 4 right on top of Key West in their last dot. Excuse me. Now, again, there's so much uncertainty. But as far as intensity is concerned, unless Irma makes landfall or gets extremely close to some of these islands, and thus rapid weakening can occur due to the land interaction, this storm will probably retain most of its intensity, and if it doesn't get close to one of those islands, it will probably be a Category 4 by the time it reaches Florida, the Florida neighborhood. So it was sort of between two choices here. Either this storm makes landfall on some of the other islands, such as Puerto Rico, the Dominican Republic, which on average reduces a storm's intensity by 2 categories or 3, and then onto Cuba, which will cause untold destruction and human cost. And in return, there'll probably only be a Category 1 or 2 impacting Florida. And that's pretty much what we're talking about right now. We're pretty much saying that a minimal hurricane is the least that some parts of Florida will receive, but we just don't yet know which. So let's see. There's plenty more questions. How much stronger could it get? Another valid question. In this sort of situation, when it comes to storms, and when it comes to something as dramatic as what Irma has produced already so far, there really are no experts and no professionals in the field left to have any more of a say than anyone else can have, in my opinion. Anything is a valid answer in terms of how strong Irma could become. Whether it will go ahead and do that will remain to be seen. It would be extremely unlikely that the storm would intensify beyond 190, but 190 itself, I should think, is quite possible and possibly even likely. More questions. How do you tell a stadium effect from the satellite? Well, that's just a designation that doesn't really rely on any particular criteria. It's just a term coined when the inside of the eye, usually by reconnaissance planes, you get to see the stadium effect in more. You get to see it a bit more fully because the edge of the eye there, you can just about make it out on the satellite. It's not as if the eye is a solid cylinder with defined edges. It's a very curved effect from the center of the eye into the eye wall and towards the top of the eye wall, and thus that's why we call it a stadium effect. It's all a mass of clouds that all produce the wall. Well, let's see what else we've got then. Could Irma break Wilma's record during the next 24 hours? Which record? I mean, if you mean the pressure record of 882 millibars, there's not a chance. Not even if you, not even if Irma had 50 Celsius waters. Well, maybe that's a little bit of an exaggeration, but it's really unlikely that Irma will reach Wilma's intensity anytime in the next 5 days or 4 days. Where do you think the storm is going, and if it goes right through Florida, will everyone feel the effects due to how big the hurricane is? No. In the grand scheme of things, Irma isn't that big in hurricane terms. However, if the storm was to follow exactly the National Hurricane Center's forecast track and strike the Keys, and then maybe move into western Florida, then you would be looking at the Keys having terrible damage, western Florida having terrible damage as far north as probably the Bend area of the Panhandle, and eastern Florida from Homestead northwards would probably have minor, maybe moderate damage in some places, and further north, depending on where exactly the storm track goes. It's very difficult to speculate about these things at such an early time. If people will remember Matthew, of course, and all the uncertainty that surrounded that with Florida, there is a little bit more certainty with Florida in this instance, because the track is different. There is much less chance of a recurve. It's pretty much impossible for it to happen before Florida, and I'm pretty convinced that some areas of Florida will see hurricane force winds, but we just don't know exactly which parts yet. And what about upcoming wind shear and sea surface temperatures? Is there anything to stop it at the very least sustaining its current strength? Well, we did look at that earlier today, and if we could possibly take a look at that again, I will certainly fulfill that for you. Maybe we've got it here. Yeah, this is the latest wind shear graphic showing Irma and the low shear environment it's built for itself. Ahead of the storm is some moderate amounts of wind shear that's supposedly increasing, but it looked the same as that before, and it will probably not become an obstacle to Irma. Let's not forget another tropical storm formed today too, Jose behind Irma. That's on the right hand side, also underneath a low wind shear environment, and could become a category 2 north of the Lesser Antilles in the next 5 days. But Irma, and then you've got low wind shear again north of Hispaniola and over to Turks and Caicos Islands and the southeastern Bahamas, and then onto Cuba. Low wind shear there as well. It will push that high wind shear over Florida away to a degree until it really starts to infiltrate the storm, and Irma will really get sheared off if it goes anywhere north of Lake Okeechobee, most likely. It will certainly be on a weakening trend by then, and probably won't be of a significant intensity by the time it reaches any states north of there, if it gets there. So that's the wind shear, and we're also talking about sea surface temperatures. Well, we'll talk about that in a moment as soon as I get another graphic up to show you what the sea surface temperatures look like. But in the meantime, you can see the current forecast cone and the chances of tropical storm conditions extending pretty much all the way up Florida now. In the meantime, I'll just take a moment or two here whilst I get some more imagery. Keep sending those questions in, and I will continue to answer those. Somewhere over there is the sea surface temperatures. That's better. So you can see how they look right now. Where Irma is, sea surface temperatures are around 29 Celsius, which is well more than enough to sustain a tropical cyclone, not least of Irma's intensity. And the worst part is that sea surface temperatures are only going to increase all the way towards the Bahamas and towards Florida. The only thing really tangibly that can slow down Irma right now is land interaction, and in any serious storm tracker's view, that is a pretty frightening option. Has Jose got the same kind of conditions that Irma enjoyed? Well, the conditions for Jose will probably be slightly less good, but probably still favourable to a degree. And the National Hurricane Center certainly think it will reach hurricane status. How fast will the winds be near west of Tampa is another question. Again, it's a very pinpoint precise question for something that isn't a pinpoint precise answer at this point, and won't be until probably less than a day before it actually happens. The best that I could suggest right now for those areas is that hurricane conditions are probably likely, but I would suggest nothing more than minimal hurricane conditions at the moment until we become more certain of what may well happen. And where does the NHC think Irma is going? Well, as you saw earlier, that was the latest forecast cone from the National Hurricane Center, taking it pretty much to the Keys. But don't forget that forecast cone and what lies beyond that forecast cone, because it's not a 100% certainty cone, that the storm could move out of those areas and could still strike Florida east or west, or it could make landfall in Cuba, weaken substantially, and impact Florida only as a minimal hurricane. That would be the best case scenario for Florida, probably worst case scenario for Cuba. But as it is right now, the storm continues to close in on the Leeward Islands, and it will pass over, possibly directly over, Barbuda in the next 12 hours. In the meantime, I don't know if Craig has rejoined us or not at this point, but if he has, he can pipe up at any time. But to reiterate what warnings we currently have in effect: a hurricane warning for Antigua, Barbuda, Anguilla, Montserrat, St. Kitts and Nevis, Saba, St. Eustatius and St. Martin, St. Barthélemy, the British and US Virgin Islands, and Puerto Rico, including the islands of Vieques and Culebra. A hurricane watch for Guadeloupe, the Dominican Republic, from Cabo Engano to the northern border with Haiti, Haiti from the southern border with the Dominican Republic to Limoges St. Nicolas, the Turks and Caicos Islands, and southeastern Bahamas. A tropical storm warning for Guadeloupe and Dominica, and a tropical storm watch for the Dominican Republic from south of Cabo Engao to Isla Sayona, and Haiti from south of Limoges St. Nicolas to Port-au-Prince. Let's take another look at the latest visible imagery, which we will get on the screen for you in just a moment's time. In fact, we're not going to visible imagery just yet. We're going to more infrared imagery to show you how the storm looks on the latest images. So this first image here is from 30 minutes ago, and this second image is from 5 minutes ago. So 30 minutes ago here, 5 minutes ago on this image, and it looks like that Irma may well still be intensifying overall. Hard to tell really. Some of the eye wall has strengthened, some of it has weakened, probably stayed the same in its intensity in the last half hour. Craig, do you think Irma's still intensifying?
Let's have a look. Let me get myself re-immersed with what Irma has been up to. Well, the last few images before I had to dash off and do something real quick. So it looked like she was still going up in intensity. Well, come on, Ram. Yeah, Ram sliders appear to be dying. They're on death's door. Yeah, and they're dead.
So technical issues with some of the image clients that are showing the imagery.
Yeah. As tropical tidbit, Levi Cowan issued earlier today that you had to disable the soundings for the model runs because the server was likely to literally die on him and die on everybody else. So he's had to do that to save tropical tidbits so that everybody can look at the models safely without it. The IR is back. Oh, thank God. Had me nervous. Looking at the last few frames, she looks to be still going. Oh.
I would suggest that maybe it's staying the same in intensity right now.
It'll be interesting to see what the NHC think. It really is.
Right. Yeah.
But visible's dead. The visible imagery is dead on Rams. This is the problem when everyone's literally trying to watch at the same time. You can encounter a lot of problems, especially with RAM imagery. A lot of people use it.
Right. In the meantime,
So
let's show
looking at
this.
our waves, said,
This is another progression of how the storm's been moving through in the last
no,
several hours, and yeah, I think it would still appear that some intensification is still possible here. More questions. What levels of storm surge could be made from a storm like this? The National Hurricane Center suggesting that the storm surge would be in the British and US Virgin Islands, except St. Croix, 7 to 11 feet. Northern coast of Puerto Rico, 3 to 5 feet. And the southern coast of Puerto Rico and St. Croix, 1 to 2 feet is what's expected if the peak surge occurs at high tide.
Is obviously, well, is not a good thing, and it would possibly prove catastrophic if that were to happen. But the Irma is having some major issues. It's not really much to go on because it's having issues.
Now we've got the NOAA floaters, which we haven't shown yet, so let's blow that up on the screen here.
I don't know whether they're still running slow as well, because apparently they were running slow also.
Well, running just fine here, and this is how the visible imagery of the storm has been showing up in the last few hours. As you can see, and Craig, I'm not sure if you can see this on the stream, by hurricane standards, it is still pretty small. You still there? Somewhere?
Broke up horribly.
Oh, sorry about that. Just saying that by hurricane standards it still looks pretty small. Okay, maybe yeah.
She's still a very small system, small and compact, which is also very, very dangerous, but the eye is it's as if it doesn't really fit for a small storm. The eye was due to the eye's size, but I mean, look at it.
Behind it, we've also got imagery of what Jose looks like. This is the newest tropical storm that's formed, and we want to give this a mention for at least a fleeting moment or two. And by the way, the other disturbance, 95L off the coast of Mexico in the Bay of Campeche, is up to 80% chance of formation in the next 5 days. Not good for Texas. And Jose is currently at 40 miles per hour and could pass pretty close to the same Lesser Antilles, Leeward Islands, as a Category 1 or 2 hurricane in the next 4 or 5 days. So there's another thing on the horizon there as well, potentially, which would be catastrophic if it affected any of those islands after what we're already seeing.
Yeah, it's not good at all. It really is not. So it's all now down to a matter of question is what Jose is going to do. Jose is not looking half bad, but he's early days yet. So, but obviously our main urgent focus is obviously Irma. But we will be keeping a very, very close Jose and possibly the next storm in the Gulf of Mexico, the Invest 95L, which is at 80% in the next 5 days and 70% in the next 48 hours. The NC says that the system is likely to become a tropical depression during the next couple of days while it meanders over the southwestern Gulf of Mexico. Regardless of development, heavy rains associated with this disturbance are likely over portions of eastern Mexico during the remainder of the week.
Yes, and obviously we will probably be joined by several of our other Force 13 team members later in the evening as the storm continues to develop. And questions, is it possible that Irma could reach 200 miles per hour, Craig?
there is that possibility. I don't harm, but I honestly, a part of me wants to say no, you're being stupid, but then there's a part of me that has that small inkling.
I don't think it's stupid at all. I think it's possible.
To be honest, I don't really want to say it, but there is the possibility that it might.
There is the possibility
that it might.
If it doesn't hit land areas such as the big land areas is the one I'm talking about. Land areas such as Puerto Rico to a smaller extent, but the big ones, Hispaniola and Cuba, if it doesn't go close enough to those storms for it to weaken the storm substantially, you really could be looking at something extremely strong, akin to the Labor Day hurricane of 1935 off the coast of the Florida Keys. And I think we don't have a reputation, and we never have done anything scaremongerish for our broadcasts. We were here with Matthew, and we were really we were saying that it would be a pretty bad storm, but we weren't going completely over the edge like everyone else in the news media was. And with so many other storms in the past, Erica was the big egg on face moment of 2015 when it was projected to be a hurricane, but this one really is. I can't see it not being the big one that everyone talks about. Who will it be the big one for is the big question. It won't be the big one for everyone. And that is why some people will feel a bit disillusioned even after this storm passes, if it doesn't hit them, ironically. But that's just how
that's
it
true,
is.
Because when they started issuing advisories on Erica, and some of the models were literally going, OTT on Erica, and look what happened. It was one of the biggest embarrassments you would probably see. Sure, it was one of them ones that we just didn't know. Nobody knew what it was going to do. Being ripped apart by Sal, wind shear, you name it. It was slaughtered. But you compare that to now and look at the conditions now, and Irma has just hit the sweet spot of favourable conditions, and she took advantage of them, and this is the end result: a monster Category 5 tracking across the Atlantic. And this is, to be honest, I'd never thought I'd see the day that that I would end up be witnessing this again. Witnessing a Category 5 hurricane get above 180 miles. I'm not going to go back to when the last time I heard of this and even seen this happen, but it was a long, long time ago when the last time I seen that happen. A long time ago. And makes me feel, Irma. Wow.
More interesting questions. Has your disdain for the more extreme models disappeared with this storm now? Some were predicting this sort of outcome whilst Irma was still a tropical storm. Well, no, because anyone who looks at one particular model is not doing it right. You've got to look at all of the models.
No.
And the first thing you've got to look for is consensus between models. If you've got consensus between several models and you've got consensus over consecutive runs in all of those models, then it's much more likely. And in this instance, it's a quite rare instance where 3 models have consistently said a Category 5, and lo and behold, it's verified. So this is quite different to many other scenarios that we've looked at in the past. In July and August, the GFS was predicting a 900 millibar Category 5 off the coast of Florida pretty much every day. And during Typhoon Noru, the GFS predicted an 865 millibar typhoon, which would have been the strongest in the world, and that never came close to verifying, and many other examples over the years. So it just takes a bit of education and much caution when you're looking at the model runs, and they could still be wrong at this point, and at any point during this storm's evolution. We certainly hope they are wrong, but whatever the outcome is, we'll be just tracking it, and whilst we do speculate a little bit about the future, we're never speculating about what is currently going on, and it's right in front of you, isn't it?
Yeah, to be honest, as the saying would go, the proof is in the pudding, but in this case, the proof is in the you know, folk model did say that this thing would be a Category 5, and behold, as you said, Nate, this has come to fruition. We were looking at a very significant Category 5 raging across the Atlantic. Sure to say, I hope the models are wrong about this future intensification that is supposedly to happen according to a lot of the models. But if it is to happen, we, as Nathan said, we will be tracking it. We will be doing the best we can to keep everybody up to date, and try and help inform those with the information that the NHC gives out.
Indeed. Looking at more imagery right now, which I will bring to you soon, but I just want to mention it, Craig. It would appear that the southwestern part of the eye wall is continuing to consolidate, and the storm actually looking better than it did an hour ago. Maybe, well, maybe not. Yeah. The eastern eye wall does appear to be fading ever so slightly, so maybe that's just giving and taking there, and it's working out to be the same. So probably still 185 miles an hour.
Depending on what NHC decide to come out with, because obviously, as what we think this, that, and then the NHC could turn out and say, no, it's this. So
really,
I'm
they're not always right.
And wait and see. Yeah, sometimes they're not always right, but unfortunately, we can't really, go along. We have to go along with it. But
well, I think people should question things. I think people should question things when there isn't evidence to support those things, and sometimes there isn't.
Yeah,
but that's
you
something
can start
that we
questioning.
Not to discuss at this moment in time.
Yeah, that would be the wise idea not to. But obviously it's up to them to see what they decide to do, because they could see something different, and they could be looking at something that we're not looking at, or we can't get access to. So, it's all down to what they see the storm to be doing over the last few hours or so, depending on how they do their advisories.
Any news on recon flights at this time?
Well, the last I knew before we went air, there was literally none.
Really? Why?
Actually, can low-level flight. I think I don't know. An AF309 went in, recorded the Category 5 winds. The NOAA 2 literally did one pass and got the heck out of Dodge.
Right.
Quite literally. There is an upper level reconnaissance, but it's just going around the parameter of Irma right now. So theoretically, that's the only recon that's going on, but that's the recon that's not entering this storm at all. So there's no low level.
Okay. Well, I'm sure we'll be joined by more people on our stream in the intervening minutes, hours, days that we may well be here looking at Hurricane Irma.
Yeah.
But if you've got any questions or comments for us whilst we're on the air, we'll bring the imagery to you shortly. I'm just working on something else whilst there's only 2 people here. There's so much work that goes on behind the scenes. Let's try and now get some more of the infrared imagery if possible. That might take a moment or two here. Things running slowly, Craig.
Yes, very, very slowly, unfortunately. But this sort of comes back to, when the last big hurricane in the Atlantic, Matthew, and that was active, everybody was literally looking at the site, local tidbits, and all. Every site was pretty much running running very, very slow
So the
because
image you're
everybody wants
looking
to
at
see
now
it.
is from 15 minutes ago, and the first image there, this image here is a little bit older, around 27 minutes. So a difference of around 12 minutes there. You can see how the storm has changed. Not very much overall, but that's how it's proceeding.
Yeah.
And there's the visible.
But I tell you what, she's literally a stunning hurricane to behold and witness. But the question remains to be seen: what on earth is she going to do Lesser Antilles? This is well, obviously a lot of folk would tell you from the Lesser Antilles and beyond that this is definitely the last thing they certainly want. They don't want a hurricane at all, which is obviously perfectly understandable. It's a living hell. I know I'll probably never experience a hurricane, but I know from doing this, storm tracking, um, it's and learning the impacts that they give to land. It's horrible, turning innocent people's lives upside down. And homes that people have worked so hard for to earn just leveled. Virtually within minutes or hours. It can hit you right between the eyes if you're not really used to seeing it. But it just goes to show that there is
Alright.
a lot of people out there that just aren't as lucky as some folk in the earth are. But I hope that the people in the path of Irma are going to be okay. I hope they get through this. And I know that this is not going to be easy to try and get back onto your feet, but I'm pretty sure that everyone will try their best to pitch in
Well,
and help you.
Hasn't happened yet, but it's about to for those
Yeah.
islands in particular. What is potentially thankful, if anything, Craig, is that its wind radius must be very small. The maximum winds.
Well, it must be, but if it's like what the NHC says, then well, anything if any of the islands do take a direct hit, then
I think Barbuda
well,
will. Antigua will probably get hurricane force winds. Probably not the worst. It will probably survive.
probably not the worst of the hurricane now, but
Barbuda,
they will
I'm
experience some of it.
extremely worried about. Montserrat is the one just to the southwest. Excuse me, southwest of Antigua, and that's likely to receive maybe hurricane force winds or high tropical storm force winds. Same with Guadeloupe actually. And then further towards the west, you've got places like St. Martin and Anguilla, which are two other places I'm extremely concerned about with this storm.
Yeah, but looking at her, it's amazing how a hurricane can go from something, pretty much something harmless to something that is, life threatening, and within a couple of days, and so powerful. It's just amazing how it's just an
Been coming
amazing
though.
sight to watch.
All
Just
right, but
watch
we really got to take
a
some
little piece of
questions.
vapor become this.
We really got to take some questions. Could this be the strongest storm in records ever? Um, it depends who you ask. If you ask an official, they'll say it could happen because it's getting pretty close. If you ask me, if you're talking about the Atlantic only, the answer's no. If you're talking about the world, the answer's definitely no.
No.
But it will. It's already the strongest storm in its area. So,
Yeah.
given the circumstances it's in, it's another Isabel, really.
Pretty much, yeah. But worse. A lot
Right.
worse.
Yeah, certainly stronger. All right.
Yeah.
I'm sure we have more. When is it going to make a right turn in the middle of Florida? NHC on the track forecast shows it make it in the middle. I don't really understand that personally, but about the Florida, the models are flip-flopping around, Craig, from western Florida to eastern Florida, and not committing, and I don't think any sensible human would commit to a prediction either side either.
No, it's going to be very touch and go, because this landfall site, if it does make one on Florida, that is, if it does, it's really difficult to tell. You know, it's because, seeing most of the models have a general consensus taking it north of Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic, Haiti, through the Bahamas, and north of Cuba, and some taking it still into Cuba as a very significant hurricane. But what happens if it does make landfall in Florida, or it doesn't? It does remain to be seen. I don't want to say it's too far out, but I'm going to say it is too far out. Yeah, it's still early days, but it's not early days for the storm, but it's early days in terms of Florida landfall. Especially if the models are, flip flopping like that, from east to west. But if they are coming to a consensus, we say within the next 2 or 3 days, or if not longer than that, then maybe then you could start to worry about what Irma could do. Not saying you shouldn't be worried right now. You should be paying attention to Irma, because it could pose a threat to Florida. So,
all right, let's move on.
Yeah,
I'm sure we'll get many more questions about that, specific ones. How safe is Haiti? The last thing it needs is this thing hitting them after Matthew. Well, we'll be watching that one extremely closely as the storm continues to progress. Any small southward deviation from the forecast can make all the difference for Haiti right now, Craig.
Yeah, anything from now, anything is going to be could possibly be the saving grace for Haiti and all that. But Irma, I'm still going to say Irma is still very unpredictable in what she's done, because to be honest, I am honestly surprised that she's gotten this strong, and this early. It's going to be. She's still a very unpredictable hurricane. She's still showing it in terms of strength and movement yet. I know the NHC are saying that she's moving west as of 26A advisory, which still shows obviously 160 knots, 185 miles an hour. But this is going to be very hard to tell. Does she, or is she going to come close to Dominican Republic or Haiti, or is she going to miss it, give it tropical storm force winds, or tropical storm conditions, and then after that, what's in it for Cuba? I mean, what could Irma have in store for Cuba? Will she hit Cuba, or will she just miss it? This from Irma is it's a very large mess in what she's doing, and in terms of predictability, it's one of them hurricanes in the Atlantic. It's an absolute nightmare for meteorologists, and especially for the NC, to try and even predict where she's going to be and where she's going to go. But then again, it's the peak month, so this is basically the month that gives meteorologists in the Atlantic absolute horrible headaches to try and track a hurricane with.
Indeed, this is Force 13 Live, and we're near the end of this hour, coming up to 8 p.m. UTC, the current time. The National Hurricane Center will be updating with their big 6-hourly update. The full advisory package will be coming out in an hour. Here's the latest visible image of the storm, and maybe we've got a new one. That's the latest we've got there. That's from around 16 minutes ago, showing the eye of the storm, and you can just about make out the outlines of the islands there as well nearby. We will be joined by more people as time progresses this evening, as people join us from mainly the Americas, obviously. It's myself and Craig, the UK crew, here briefly for the first part of this evening. Here is the latest infrared imagery as well, and you can see now Guadeloupe on the edge of the storm there too. We'll try and get some radar imagery in the next hour as well. But Irma, if you've just joined us, still has winds of 185 miles per hour and a pressure of 926, and still might not be done.
Yeah, I'm looking at... Sorry about that, Nathan, but just looking at the latest IR, cloud tops are starting to blow up close on the very tight to the northern eye wall and the western eye wall. And I'll tell you what, looking at IR, the eye buzzsaw, it's terrifying to watch. You know, I don't want to suggest that this thing could be stronger than 185, but you know that it might be, but I hope it's not. That regardless of it, as folk do, as we normally say, if it's 160 or 200, it doesn't matter whether it's 160 or 200 miles an hour, it's still going to do the exact same damage. So, you know, this is just one horrifying hurricane to watch. I'm just watching it. I just feel horrible. Just watching it. I've got that sense of fear. Just watching it.
Well, there it is, and you can see all of the islands on the edge of the storm now, and things are going to get really hairy real soon tonight for those islands of the Lesser Antilles, everywhere north of Guadeloupe, and maybe even Guadeloupe itself. Antigua and Barbuda are the first places in Irma's sights, and we'll be with you throughout this evening as the storm draws ever nearer. Stay tuned, more after this.
Continues in a moment. You can follow Force 13's outlets, the website force13.co.uk, at your service at any time. You can also find us on YouTube, the channel, search Force 13, all in text, and subscribe if you haven't already. You can also find us on Facebook at Force 13, and it's at Force 13 on Twitter, that's the handle to contact us there. You can also add Fool13 on Skype, that's FOOL13, and add extension 9094 on Discord for tropical weather chat. You're watching Force 13's live streaming service. Live from Force 13 HQ, this is Force 13's live coverage of Hurricane Irma, and first of all you can see the beautiful view from Force 13 HQ, but that's where I am right now. My name's Nathan Foy. I'm joined by our team this evening, which we'll introduce shortly, but first of all, let's see if we can get a picture right now. That is Irma right now, as it continues to move towards the Leeward Islands. It's just on the edge of the screen there. I want to fix that briefly. But it's got winds of 185 miles per hour, a pressure of 926 millibars at the last update from the National Hurricane Center. The next one is coming up in an hour. Alright, let's see who's online right now with us. I think we're still joined by Craig. Hello.
Yes, you are, Nathan. Hello.
We're also joined by Cesar.
Yes, hello, Nathan.
Cesar joins us from Mexico. What are your thoughts?
I'm incredibly surprised about this storm. When I woke up, I said Irma will be a Category 5, but I never expected that Irma will have such an intensity, and is currently right now one of the most strongest hurricanes in the whole Atlantic basin.
Cesar, are you there?
And we're also joined by Devon as well. Hi, Devon.
Hey, guys.
And you're joining us from Pennsylvania. What are your thoughts? And a lot of people still asking questions, and will be asking questions for days, about what Irma will do on the East Coast.
I'm currently trying to figure out the answers to those questions. Models aren't really being any sort of a help right now. Obviously, most of the dynamical models have completely whiffed the intensity of Irma. I think really only the HWRF and the what is it now, the HMON, have even come close to what Irma is right now. So since they've underestimated the intensity, the tracks are going to completely change. And now, once again, we have basically no idea where it's going. It looks like a majority of the spaghetti tracks are leading towards Florida, but there's still a chance that it could recurve before it even ever gets to Florida still.
Now, you're talking about the models underestimating its intensity. You're talking about more initially, correct? Because yesterday the HMON thought it would reach Category 5 status before the end of yesterday.
Yeah. Well, I'm just saying, like, as peak intensity, it seems like most of the dynamical models just whiffed. Clearly, though, this storm is not anything to mess around with at all. 924 millibars is an extremely strong storm in the Atlantic. That's got to rank really high up there. Obviously, the wind's 185 miles per hour. That would already tie it for second strongest wind speed recorded in an Atlantic hurricane. That would be tied with Wilma and Gilbert, and you're still behind Allen yet. So we're in extremely high territory here with how strong this storm is. It looks like that I will say though, probably more importantly than anything else, is that basically any of the Lesser Antilles that are currently underneath a hurricane warning, oh boy, you're in for a really rough ride with this system. Blowing up to a Category 5 the way that it has, it looks like that they're in for a really difficult ride over the next day and a half. Same thing with Puerto Rico. It looks like the storm's going to pass real close. Effects in Hispaniola seem less likely. It looks like the storm's kind of going to bend around the mountains there, but then Cuba, it looks like that the storm's probably going to affect Cuba in one significant way or another. And then after that, it could go into the Gulf of Mexico. It could go all the way out to sea.
Really? When you say out to sea, what do you mean by that?
I've seen some ensemble runs that pretty much parallel it right up the East Coast and send it out.
Alright. I believe we've now got our first radar pictures of this storm coming in from Guadeloupe right now. I'm trying to get them onto the picture. Let's see if this works. Yes. Here's the latest radar imagery of the storm moving closer and closer to the islands. I don't know if anyone on here can see that on the stream, guys, but if you can, does that tell you anything at all?
What are we looking at here?
Radar imagery coming in here.
Oh, yeah.
In the radar imagery, Irma looks incredibly good, and of course it's a really an emergency and a big concern to those small islands, because they are about to suffer the power of a hurricane that they have never experienced before, and who knows what will be the consequences of a hurricane that will make landfall in a pretty small island.
Yes, you can easily see the structure of the storm right there, and
practically
it looks like it's going to go through I think probably now the 97th eyewall replacement cycle since this weekend. It's developing concentric eyewalls yet again.
Yeah.
And yeah, I see it coming into image right there, and boy, it looks like that the northern Lesser Antilles are in for a really rough night with this hurricane.
I'm most concerned about
extremely dangerous system.
I'm most concerned about Barbuda right now.
I just would not want to be in the path of this thing at all.
You can also see some significant showers moving over Dominica and then onto Martinique as well, from the southern band. But apart from that, just some isolated showers by the looks of things before the real stuff gets in and is starting to push its way through Barbuda and Antigua pretty soon. But there we are, that's the radar imagery right now, and we'll check in with that. We'll check in with that on regular occasions throughout this evening. Let's see if we could go back now to what imagery are we going to load here? Maybe some more of the visible imagery. That is the latest visible. If you've not seen this imagery before, you'll be blown away by it. But you can see how close it is getting to land. That's how it looks if you were to observe from space the storm's appearance right now. Images taken every 1 minute from the GO-16 satellite. This animation showing a 40-minute period. A 40-minute period which goes up to pretty much right now and continues to update regularly. If you've got any questions for us whilst we're on the air, do send us a message. Start your message with Force 13 all in text and the content of your message, and we'll respond. But in the meantime, not too much more to say from me, at least. And in the next hour, at the end of this hour, the National Hurricane Center will be updating with another update. And Devon, what do you think about its intensity? Do you think it stayed the same?
This storm is not obeying any kind of satellite.
We'll be able to get your
technique.
picture up in just a few moments, but just working out how that works
Right.
first of all.
Yep, that's all right. But anyways, yeah, this storm isn't really obeying any kind of satellite estimation technique, so your guess is as good as mine. If we were just going by bone dead satellite estimates, I would say 145 tops, but this is clearly
Wow.
much stronger than that. It's much stronger than that. Probably at least 15, 20 months, more than that even over it. I would guess that it's probably weakened since the last time recon's in there, but
We've got your display now,
more
by
than
the
5
way.
or 10 miles an hour. This storm is definitely still a very dangerous Category 5 hurricane, and all preparation should be rushed to completion, no doubt about it.
We've got your
And
display now. If you want
you're
to,
in the path of this storm, hunker down.
talk about it, about what exactly we're seeing on this imagery, Devon.
Yeah, the image. So what this is the standard BD curve image. I'm sorry that I can't get an animated image up, but the servers are running so slow because everybody's trying to get these images right away.
Yeah.
You know, I've got great internet here. It's just the servers are running real slow. Everything's running slow. Tidbits is running slow. The floaters are running
Tidbits pretty
slow.
much. Tidbits pretty much nearly died.
Oh yeah, I've been getting 502 errors all day. I mean, and that's really
Levi had to I think
how much they
suspend.
trust him. But yeah, I'm just looking at this storm right now. Now, traditionally, what you would want to see with this image is you see the white crescent moon shape that's currently halfway around the eye of the storm. Traditionally, what you would want is that you would want that full white to wrap all the way around the eye, and that would get you 160 miles an hour, which is a minimal Cat 5. But since the eye there is considerably warmer than that, I guess there is some leeway to give there. However, like I said, the satellite techniques have been completely underestimating this storm, and it's not even because I don't know why, honestly, but the storm is much stronger than it appears. This is definitely still a Category 5. Planes found 185 miles per hour in the storm, and in my personal opinion, when the storm looked a lot worse than this. So we'll see what happens. I don't know if they're going to fly another plane into it. Since the U.S. Virgin Islands are right on target with this storm, I don't think they're going to do that. Same thing with Puerto Rico. It's also pretty much right in the crosshairs. So I don't think that they're going to be doing too much more recon until it gets closer to the States.
No, just to let you know that we're planning to send out
Well, we lost Craig's signal there. Craig, unfortunately, your connection is extremely poor.
Yeah, this is what happens when it's British Telecom.
Oh,
There we
really?
go. But just before I was cut out though, Devin, I was saying they were planning to send out another recon for Irma, and it was going to be a low level one, but they had to cancel it for reasons I don't know. But it might be a technical fault with the
Well,
plane.
the reason that they had to cancel it probably has to do with the fact that there's a Category 5 bearing down on the U.S. Virgin Islands. You know, that's a pretty
That would be one of the
to delay any
reasons.
kind of plane flight.
But I seen earlier one of the Noah 2. They did one pass and then
Blimey, that signal's really poor. We're really slow on there, Craig. But I think we sort
it
of...
looked pass on the eastern eye wall and then just literally ran. It
ran
didn't go
away.
back in.
Yeah.
What was the reasoning? Whether or the I honestly don't know, but that there's that possibility that they may have been ordered because the cat they well because Irma was getting that strong, it might have been proving a danger to the reconnaissance plane that was there. But yeah, I'm sure there's a perfectly understandable reasoning behind it. That might be some of the reasoning. It might be, but I don't know the main
Right.
reasoning. But I'm sure there is a perfectly understandable reasoning.
Now, Devon, what are your thoughts of those in and the model runs? Oh, whilst you're there, I don't know if you could possibly show us the spaghetti model runs for us, and maybe we can have a little discussion about Florida, and will it be east or west, is what seems to be my main question at the moment.
Mm.
Or will it just go dead center via the keys?
There we go. When we show these spaghetti models, one of the things that we're going to have to realize here, and this web page is coming up real slow because of all the traffic. Yes, things are going on here. So, plus I also have to get my hand off the mic button every single time I want to move my cursor, so that's annoying. So, anyways, here we go. Now we can pretty much see what is going on here. So a lot of the models are clustering around this. Now these are a lot of consensus models, a lot of ensemble models, but you're going to notice that there are 4 noticeable outliers. And don't worry about the OFCI because that's the official forecast from the National Hurricane Center. So there are 4 main outliers.
So
The first
wait, the official
one is
forecast is an outlier,
HWRF.
Devon.
What?
The official forecast is an outlier?
What?
Well, the official forecast there at the 120-hour point is quite some distance away from the other models.
Yeah, that's probably because of the things I'm about to say.
Okay, say them.
And the first one is the HWRF model, which usually performs really well for tropical cyclone positions, anyways. It hasn't been doing as well this year as it did last year because last year, I mean, HWRF was basically the model. It's almost like it didn't need anything else. And the other one is the UK Met model, and that's usually regarded as not the greatest, but it's still out there. Both of those models take the storm directly over Cuba, which is obviously bad news for Cuba, but potentially better news for Florida, because that would definitely knock the storm intensity down a few miles an hour, to say the least. And the other models that you see, the other models that you see over here, the CTCI and the COTI, those both have to do with the Navy COAMPS model. One of them is the experimental model, and one of them is the operational model. I don't remember which one. and they both have to do with the Navy COAMPS model. And if I remember correctly, the Navy COAMPS model actually performed the best during Hurricane Harvey, right, Nathan? Yeah, Harvey.
Yeah, the report I'm currently writing for Hurricane Harvey said the CTCX model was the best with pretty much everything.
Yeah. Okay. So CTCX is the experimental. So the CTCI would be the experimental on here. The COTI would be the operational one. So they're both major outliers, and then everyone else, they're coming close. Oh boy, I'll be right back.
And an abrupt intermission begins. But Cesar, what are your thoughts of what we're looking at on the models?
Sorry, Nathan. I think I have bad connection as well. But
Really?
yes,
Gee,
but
it's
well, I'm trying
contagious.
to survive. Maybe.
What are your thoughts on the models?
Well, I'm pretty impressed about how accurate. Well, not accurate. I mean, how actually all the models are agreed that that Irma will pass over Dominican Republic and Haiti, but of course after the next 3 days, uncertainty grows, and this is when we are going to ask ourselves what will gonna happen, because some models are predicting that it will make landfall in Cuba. Others say that it will miss Florida, and others says that it will make landfall directly at Florida without making landfall at Cuba. So
Yeah, and that will be the worst case for Florida.
Of course, I think the worst case scenario is that Irma doesn't make landfall in any other in any other part until Florida, and of course this will be a complete devastation uh, from this state for this state. Sorry, and of course this is so concerning, and if Irma still intensifying as has been doing in the last 6 hours, this, well, just I can say that this is going to be a disaster that maybe we haven't saw in many years.
Well, I think that is pretty much. I mean, we don't want it to be assured, obviously, but
Of course,
realistically,
this is too soon.
realistically, this is a disaster that's going to be panning out across at least some of those Lesser Antilles tonight, into tomorrow, into Thursday, in some areas, and eventually it's going to end up moving towards the Turks and Caicos Islands, which are under hurricane watches, the southeastern Bahamas, more small islands, more people who can't evacuate, more major hurricane conditions likely along those islands.
Yeah, and this is a really concerning situation because all those small islands can easily get flooded by a storm of that intensity, and this will be practically Irma will rush all those islands entirely, brushing, practically destroying all on its path, and a lot of people will get really really affected by this storm. And I'm practically amazed of how Irma has been intensifying quickly in the last few hours, and honestly, I don't remember a hurricane with that intensity affecting those small islands before.
Not in recent times.
Yeah, so this is a concerning situation as well, because people, I must say, of course, the precautions, all the preparations uh, can be took, but Are
All right, I
are
believe I'm
those
back.
people are those people really prepared to
Mm.
suffer a hurricane with that intensity? And the that is a
Yeah.
concerning question. I believe is
Devon, what do you want to talk about next? Whilst I'm going to take
Yeah, I
a
wanted to
minute or
bring up
two.
the GFS ensembles
I'm going to
again.
take a minute or two away from the desk here whilst you go talk about that, just so that if you're greeted by a wall of
Okay.
silence, you're expecting it.
Yes. So anyways, I wanted to talk about this because this shows you, even though it looks like Florida impacts are looking extremely likely by this point, there are still outliers. So where in Florida is it going? We can maybe say with 66% certainty, maybe if that, it'll make landfall going northward on southern Florida, um, and then present a track similar to Hurricane David of 1979. That's what most of these models are kind of saying here. It's a weird track, but it has happened before. So another thing is though that we still have models going out. We still have a model ensemble taking it out to sea. We've still got model ensembles taking it into the Gulf of Mexico. And this is just one model even, you know, all those models that you see in there, they have runs like this. So yeah, you can see that there was definitely errors, and actually to really push the point home. Not that the Canadian model is exactly the greatest model for tropical cyclone forecasting, but let's go there real quick and pull up the Canadian model. And what you'll see here is that there's an even larger spread. There's an even larger error here. But one of the things about the Canadian model is that none of them go out to sea. They all go up the east coast that at least curve quickly. So that's something to take into consideration. The CMC wants to pull this storm to the left after it makes landfall, and that's also been a trend with the models. It seems they've wanted the storm to take a sharp northward turn and then a sharp hook westward to some degree. And the CMC has really taken that and amplified it really. This is pretty much what the GFS looked from 10 days out, but then you realize now it's only 5 days out. And yeah, so I would probably say that the outlier situations here are unlikely to say the least. You're not going to have a category 3 going to Long Island or a category 4 going into Rhode Island. I highly doubt that's going to happen. If that ends up happening just because I jinxed it, I mean, wow, I've got really bad luck. I'll just say that. But
Something I have to
that's
pick up on
looking.
though. Obviously,
What?
something I've got to pick up on though is the best analog, like arguably the best analog, is Hurricane Donna right now, and Donna went up the east coast as a Category 2. How is that different to this, in your opinion?
Well, Donner
Apart from it
was
already
a
being
lot
stronger than that.
weaker. Donna was a lot weaker. That's the big difference here.
But 2 days ago, we were still saying that Donna would be the best analog, and is it
Yeah,
all down to?
I thought that Donna would be a really good analog to this storm, definitely. But then, and then, this really went. This really went from Cat 4 to Cat 5 pretty quickly there in a nice bout of rapid intensification.
So you're
And
saying
now
that
we're dealing with a 185-mile-an-hour monster.
you're
And I
saying that
really
because
think
this storm
that
is stronger,
disqualifies it from any hope of Donna being an analog.
really, but because this is stronger, you're saying that as a result, it's going to move inland more readily.
That's something I've been trying to figure out. You would think that the stronger the storm is and the tighter the pressure gradient is, the more that the storm is going to get steered. That would be a common like a common sense type of thinking. Usually, the stronger the storm is, the more it gets steered. That's why there's kind of a rule of thumb with the. I don't know if this is still a rule of thumb. This is probably really outdated, but one of the things was taught that tracks that end up going to the right of the National Hurricane Center cone are usually above the forecasted intensity,
Right.
and tracks to the left of the National Hurricane Center cone are usually below the forecast intensity.
Well, it would make sense, wouldn't it, as a rule of thumb, because weaker storms stay further south.
Usually. Yeah, usually. So usually you see the stronger, deeper storms. Let me get this off the screen because this is awful.
What are we going to look at instead?
I was
Okay, we're back to that image.
Let's look at this.
Yeah.
Radar from Martinique.
Yeah, it's the same one that we've been showing not so long ago. And your observations?
Yeah, and like I said, you can clearly see there that it's trying to form a second eye wall there again. And I don't know if it's because of the storm getting closer to the radar or not, but it does look like the reflectivities in the eye have also picked up as well in the past few hours. I don't know
if a storm of this strength,
that's a product of the storm moving closer to the radar.
If a storm of this strength commences an eye wall replacement cycle and makes landfall during the eye wall replacement cycle, what would people expect on land from that?
I don't think it's going to matter really. and here's the sad reasoning why is, you see, there's a reason why there's only a Category 5 on the Saffir-Simpson hurricane wind scale.
Yeah.
Category 5 usually represents complete leveling of structures. You have to realize that that Category 5 wind sustained for 1 minute is basically an F4 tornado. And usually tornadoes, they last for 15 minutes, 10, 15 minutes, if it's really long. This storm is going to last several hours. So you have to realize that these guys may be in, an F3 tornado type wind for an hour plus, depending on who gets the inner eye wall. It would be absolutely insane.
And Jose is now a 45-mile-an-hour storm, and the National Hurricane Center predicting a peak of 110.
Yeah, I think Jose is probably going to curve quicker than Irma. Usually tail end storms curve quicker, usually. But one of the interesting things is that the really long range models, they're saying that Jose is going to stall out in the Atlantic Ocean at some point and do a loop. So
yeah, I saw that.
It would actually end up having Irma curve back down to the south as a remnant low. Almost a similar situation to Ivan and Jean of 2004.
Oh, yes.
There would be a similar interaction there. Now, I'm not saying that Ivan's going to turn back to the south and re-enter the Gulf of Mexico and become a tropical depression. No. I'm definitely not saying that. But the steering pattern seems to be similar. But again, this is also 300 some hours out. So obviously that is very subject to change.
Indeed. The National Hurricane Center will be updating on Irma pretty soon. Do you think they'll keep the intensity? I don't see why not.
I don't see why not either.
Based on how they
the
always
storm
used.
doesn't look any worse on satellite, but doesn't look any better either.
Yeah.
So
I'll be inclined to agree on that. I can't see them upping it. The only reason why they upped it the last 3 times was because of the planes.
And that's the only way that you'd be able to up it, because usually for a 185-mile-an-hour storm, you'll want to have much colder cloud tops than this around the eye.
Mm.
If you want to take a look at a good 185-mile-an-hour monster, take a look at a Typhoon Meranti as it was making landfall in the Philippines.
Put this storm in the West Pacific and you've got barely 125 miles an hour.
I don't know about that, but...
Really? I think so. In the satellite.
I don't know about that, because a black ring around the eye would be enough for 130.
Nah.
Yeah.
Well, certainly not 140 anyway.
Well, that's why I say it would be enough for 130. Not 140, 130.
Right, well that's petty anyway.
140 would be about where it is right now, and the ADT says actually 145, and again, that's using a Westpac algorithm.
Mm.
So there you go. I mean, this is completely destroying the Dvorak scale here, as most of these storms actually end up doing. You take a look at Isabel. That was a lot stronger when the planes flew into it than it looked like on satellite. You take a look at Felix, it was the same way. A lot stronger from the recon than it looked on satellite. So you take a look at these storms that are in this area, and they typically appear a lot stronger than they did on satellite. Now, I would say on satellite, Irma looked like it at peak looked like it was about 165 miles an hour.
The National Hurricane Center have also issued their first advisory on Tropical Depression 13, which has just formed.
Oh, wow. Tropical Depression 13.
Now, where's that going?
That should just go into Mexico, shouldn't it?
They're predicting a 65-mile-an-hour peak.
What?
Cesar? I've not got the specifics yet. I've only got the data points. Its landfall's going to be somewhere near 21 north, 96 west. Where's that?
It's practically close.
I'm trying to figure that out.
It's not Texas anyway.
It's 21 north, you said?
Yeah, somewhere around there.
Yes.
Well, that's actually to the south and west of where it is right now, but predominantly south.
That's going to be an odd track then.
Yeah, practically like...
If you remember Hurricane Nate of 2011, that was an odd track.
We'll wait and see its forecast going. Let me just try and extrapolate from the... So they think...
Right.
Yeah, they think it will sort of bend southeast and then southwest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, right now it's moving east at 2 miles an hour.
Well, there you go. That's Tropical Depression 13.
This storm,
Forecast to become Tropical Storm Katia.
Indeed.
Right.
And from the way that the models have been predicting Atlantic storms this season, probably Hurricane Katia, because we've just been underestimating everything.
It's true. It's true.
Well, this disturbance, of course, has been...
I mean, I don't really want to be that person to be like, and to say stuff like that, but you take a look at Harvey. We missed its RI until it pretty much was happening, and usually the models like the ships was right on with Harvey. It was like, okay, there is a 1 in 2 chance of this becoming a Cat 4, and You know, we even said it on air that there was about a 50% chance of it becoming a Cat 4, and lo and behold, it became a Cat 4 right at landfall.
Hmm.
So there you go. I mean, that's pretty much right on the money, accurate. But the ship's model has been, you know, it hasn't wanted to strengthen this storm at all. It's performed very terribly with this storm. Now, I'd only expected it to peak at 105 knots at one point, and now we're way above that since we're at 160.
And Devon, you might want to talk briefly about Irma and its CDPS scale stage. Am I right in saying it's stage 9?
Yes. And if it gets any stronger, it's a full 10.
Do you want to explain
well, storms making landfall is a stage 10. Only 2 of them have ever happened, to my knowledge. And both of them were in the Mexico, the Yucatan Peninsula.
Mm-hmm.
And they were both right on top of each other.
Well, that's a trivia one for the viewers.
Yeah, yep. You got Gilbert and you have Wilma, which both were number 1 and number 2 as the strongest storms in the Atlantic Hurricane Basin ever. If that tells you anything. And this storm looks like it might be competing for number 3.
Wow.
Well, wasn't Allen?
I mean, we'll see what it does once it gets past Hispaniola and into that Florida Strait. We'll just have to see what happens there.
But Devon, Allen was stronger than
basically
Wilma
the way I
Gilbert,
see it,
right?
anything can happen anymore with these storms.
Yeah,
I mean,
Cesar?
Yes, I mean, Devon said that Wilma and Gilbert were the strongest hurricanes in the Atlantic Basin, but well, I think
I'm sorry if I'm taking up way too much talking time. I'm just trying to fill in the white noise.
Can you hear Cesar, Devon?
No.
Oh,
really? Why not? That's odd. Well, Cesar's talking here. I'll cue you in, I guess. I don't know, but I don't know why you can't hear him.
Well, I was saying that Devon said that Wilma and Gilbert were the strongest hurricanes in the Atlantic Basin, but I think Allen was the strongest one, with has 190 miles per hour.
Do you agree that Allen's the strongest hurricane, Devon? Rather than most intense? Is he still with us?
I don't know.
Oh, who's that? We're joined by Orlando.
Well,
hello.
Hi, how are you?
I'm alright. A little nervous, but other than that, I'm fine.
And I don't think we've spoken to you today, so take it from the top. What are your thoughts on Irma?
Well, currently, I'm actually astounded how fast it was able to intensify and get itself organized overnight. Right now, it remains, although it was already a considerable threat to the Lesser Antilles and Puerto Rico, it's now increased overall since it's increased its intensity and its better structure, which now allows its wind field to stretch out a little more. And when you have those two mixed, you have a terrible situation when you have storm surge and wind hitting the coastline of these island nations.
Indeed, and you're seeing it on the radar imagery right now, and do you think another eye wall replacement cycle is about to occur?
Wait, you said eye wall replacement cycle?
It's possible, considering on the southern side, in particular on this radar loop, it appears to have 2 eye walls.
I think it's possible, but I'm not that sure if it is really a double eye wall there.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I'm not. I have to wait a couple more frames to confirm that, in my eyes at least, because the microwave imagery doesn't even show that unless it just began.
It must have just been in the last hour or so. Again, it could be a trick of the view.
Yeah.
I would like to say that those concentric eyeballs are very, very close to each other, so it's also very possible that the microwave imagery doesn't have the resolution to pick up the double eyeball feature.
Ah.
Well, yes, but you're also able to see it on IR, I think, and you'd see the eye begin to shrink if that was the case. I don't think I've noticed the eye shrink yet, so we just have to wait
Well,
and see.
it's something that's just starting now, so
Well,
like,
yeah, that's why I said we have to just wait and see.
hmm.
And do
If
you
you
think?
take a look at the RB top, I think you can see the cool cloud tops and then warm cloud tops and then another band of cool cloud tops. Take a look at it there.
And you would suggest that it would keep Category 5 intensity despite this eyewall replacement cycle if it happens.
Yeah,
Well, it's already kept Cat 5 through 1.
Wow.
I expect it to stay, maybe weaken a little bit, but besides that, I expect it to remain Category 5 and still very dangerous.
We
Unfortunately, the storm is just too strong to even become lower than a Category 5, um, since it's already all the way up in the ranking with 185-mile-per-hour winds. So, basically, in other words, even if it was to weaken, it would still be above 160 miles per hour.
just looking at the first cone for Tropical Depression 13. Looks very interesting. Just a real curve out into the Bay of Campeche and back into land again. No watches or warnings for Tropical Depression 13.
Not yet, but I think those warnings will spread out when that tropical depression intensifies to a tropical storm, and it will possibly make landfall in the south part of the state of Veracruz in Mexico. But well, this is just we will going back later with that, because the main concern, of
That's
course,
a distraction
is
right now. It's two distractions out there in the Atlantic.
exactly. So we just have to pay attention to Irma. That is a big concern, and of course a monstrous hurricane, possibly one of the strongest ever seen in the whole Atlantic basin.
Gee.
That's right. This is incredibly concerning. I'm speechless, I must say. Yesterday I said that I see pretty difficult that Irma will attain such that intensity, and when I woke up this morning, I was like, what the hell happened? I mean, I never thought that Irma could attain such intensity in just few hours.
Right.
So
If anyone's got any comments or questions for us whilst we're here, do send us a message. Start your message with Force 13 all in text, and we'll get back to you. And it's not too long until the National Hurricane Center do their update on Irma. Whether it will happen before or after we take our little break remains to be seen.
Well, do you think that the next advisory they'll increase the intensity or
I highly
keep?
doubt it.
Okay.
Do you?
Well, at the moment, I haven't gotten a chance to review the situation that well since I just got home several minutes ago.
Well, its presentation is pretty much the same, and there's two of me, by the way.
We are now 10 minutes ahead to see the next update of NHC. It will be pretty interesting. Uh, what will be the report of it? I'm pretty sure it will get at least it will be this it will keep the same intensity, but I must say I won't be surprised if it's a little bit more stronger than it is right now.
Questions: how many potential hurricanes could be out there soon? Well, Jose will probably become a hurricane. 13L may or may not become a hurricane. Could get to 65 miles an hour, NHC is predicting. And after that, who knows what else will be on the horizon. Let's see what else we have. There was another... what will conditions be like on the British Virgin Islands is another question there. And pretty bad is what I would suggest. Hurricane force winds are pretty much guaranteed. And depending on where exactly the track of the storm takes it, if it goes south of forecast, it could be worse than bad. Oh, that was briefly looking at the West Pacific there.
Yeah, that depression
I
as well.
brought up TD-19 in the West Pacific to see if that was going to turn into a typhoon. No.
It won't form, so let's don't pay attention with that useless system.
Well, question, do I still have a twin?
Not you, just that we do in your headphones, and your, not headphones, your speakers.
We can hear our voices.
The problem usually is when you have the microphone too close to the,
Well, it's not that close, I'm actually a bit distant.
Okay. And the update is out right now. The government of the Dominican Republic has issued a hurricane warning along the north coast of the Dominican Republic for the border with Haiti eastward to Cabo Engano. A tropical storm warning has been issued for the south coast of the Dominican Republic from south of Cabo Engano westward to the southern border with Haiti. The current wind speed is still 185 miles per hour with gusts to something else. 200 and something miles an hour is the gust. As says, I just said 225 miles per hour, thank you.
Oh my god.
And it's predicted to be a Category 5 for the next 2 days, but no real changes with the update. The cones will be updated very shortly, and I'll leave it to you guys to discuss for a moment or two.
Okay. Let's see this real quick.
I'm not sure what part of these is on the British Virgin Islands, but I can say St. Thomas in the U.S. Virgin Islands looks like it's going to be really bad, really bad. And basically guaranteed, you're basically guaranteed to get tropical storm force winds, and there's a 66, that's a 2 out of 3, 66% probability that you're going to be getting hurricane force winds. So,
well, the British Virgin Islands is north of the US Virgin Islands,
so they would be in even more trouble.
Yeah. Most likely for a direct landfall either in the British Virgin Islands or maybe along the border with the US Virgin Islands.
And obviously that would be bad. Of course, you've also got the island of Barbuda that's likely to be that conditions will not be pretty on Barbuda either.
Oh no, not at all. Could be a significant landfall there.
If you're on Barbuda and you remember Hurricane Luis back in 1995, this storm's worse.
Much worse. What other storms can you think of, Devon, in the history of that would be comparable to this for these particular islands under the hurricane warning?
There are absolutely no comparable storms. This is much stronger than anything else that has been in its region by a mile. My God, just think about that. 185 miles per hour. Nothing's ever been stronger than 175 outside of the Caribbean and Gulf of Mexico, I believe. So, put that into consideration.
Yeah. Those islands have felt major hurricanes before, but never a hurricane with that intensity. So, yeah, practically there's no comparison to other hurricanes. Irma is unique.
Well,
I will say, as far as strong storms that have affected the northern, the northern Leeward Islands and the British Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico and stuff, you know, storms like Hurricane Lenny come to mind, Hurricane Georges, Hurricane Luis, Hurricane Gonzalo from not too far long ago.
Marilyn wasn't a hurricane that affected the same places, I guess. I don't remember.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Gonzalo went through there. This storm is worse than pretty much all of them. So, even though Lenny came from the opposite way, I think Lenny is probably the closest to how strong the storm is probably going to be. So if you were significantly affected during Hurricane Lenny, and I know that was a long time ago, and same thing if you were significantly affected during Hurricane Luis, you're probably going to be even more affected during this storm. This storm, like I said, it's just so much stronger than any other storm that has ever been anywhere around its area. It's really insane.
well, we'll be leaving now for a few moments. We'll be back with more coverage after this, and we'll have more on Irma as it continues towards the islands, and it's not too far from doing its final 100 miles before its first potential landfall. We'll keep you up to date. Stay tuned.
Our live coverage continues in a moment. You can follow Force 13's outlets, the website force13.co.uk, at your service at any time. You can also find us on YouTube, the channel, search Force 13, all in text, and subscribe if you haven't already. You can also find us on Facebook at Force 13, and it's at Force 13 on Twitter. That's the handle to contact us there. You can also add Fool13 on Skype, that's FOOL13, and add extension 9094 on Discord for tropical weather chat.